Welcome back to the studio. My name is Jaco, behind the camera is Damia, and we shoot these videos because we would like to share some of the things that come through our workshop. Thank you very much if you've clicked on this link. Today is going to be a manufacturing video. As we promised, we've got a 3-stone diamond ring. We're working with emerald cut diamonds and we're working in platinum, which is my favorite metal. If you want to see how we constructed this particular ring, stay till the end and I'll show you exactly what we've done right over here. The design that the customer wanted was 3 stones next to each other. Now the center stone is just over a carat and the 2 side stones on combination is 80 points. Almost 2 carats worth of diamonds in this ring. Very classic, but the way that I approach these rings are always different. I'll make a modern version of a classic design. The concept is that the stones need to be nice and tight against each other so that there's no gaps showing. And the other thing is that we want to just emphasize the stones itself. So minimal claws, just the presentation of these 3 stones, because I know that's what caught our eye. It should be said that the very first part of this setting I was going to make a certain way, and the second ones I'm going to make another way. I started out with the center setting by making a classic sort of L-shaped reverse setting. Okay, I start with a piece of metal, nice thickness, because the idea was I was going to create a little section that's exactly a framework of the center stone. And by the way, we always start with the center stone and work our way out. Once a stone fitted right on top of the actual setting, I could then start shaping the inside to accommodate the seating of the stone, and then go towards the outside and shape the outside. And I make marks at the bottom of this setting, and then I file it from the top, respecting this little corner. I file it to meet up with a mark over here, and I know that if I made a mark on the other side I can do exactly the same. So I'm not touching the top part, this is in reverse of course. I'm making a mark on the bottom of the setting, and I'm filing away, not touching this area, until I reach that little mark, and doing the same on the other side. Then I create balance. If it's slightly out, then you're going to see it immediately. If you've got symmetry and you've got lines that are dominant, like square shaped stones or emerald cut stone shaped stones, and you have something that's not balanced, it immediately throws it off to that point and it focuses the eye on something that's not straight. So you have to keep on measuring as you're going along with this. It has to be absolutely as good as you can possibly get it. So I've created the top setting, I've angled the outside, and I've also carved out the inside. Now I'm looking at the stone itself and I'm bringing the stone towards the setting and I'm seating it in there. I'm trying to mirror what's going on the outside of the stone so that I can drop that stone about 1 millimeter maximum above the surface of the actual setting is where I want the stone to rest. So I don't stop until I've carved it out enough for that part to drop in. Last thing to do on the center setting is to create the little corners. And I was going to cut the side stones out of a solid plate. This is usually how I make my settings for emerald cuts. I basically roll out a plate which is as wide as the stones that I need, but at the same time it is as thick as the previous setting I've just made. Now, just to mention as well, by the time I measure it to create that little bar that I'm going to be cutting out for the side stones, this is a processed, finished, ready to be soldered center setting. I'm rolling out the little piece of plate the length of the stone. Well, fractionally longer, but that's what I'm going for.
The width of the plate is the length of the stone, and the thickness of the plate is the height of the previous setting.
All I need to do is flatten it out and make a little mark. Once I've made the mark, I'll cut that section in so it's nice and deep. And since I've got the little piece that I'm working with, I'm going to turn that around and do the same with the other side. I've got the center setting, I've angled the center setting. I'm taking this setting that I've just created and I'm bringing it up and against where I'm going to be soldering it. What I'm looking for now is I'm looking for the angle. Is it correct? And I realize it's not correct. I'm going to angle this setting as well. And by angling this setting, I'm going to take this angle and bring this angle and bring it down like that. And this is all in proportion to the size I'm looking for. Like I said, this is a size J, so I want that breakdown to be proportional to the rounding. and I prep my pieces which are going to connect to the center setting. Carve out the inside to match the shape of the stone. And while I've got both of them going there, I can do a good comparison to see exactly how high they're lying in comparison to the depth that they've been sunken into. I now go to the part on the edges. I'm pre-cutting the corners for the section that's going to be against this setting. Once I've soldered it, it's going to be more difficult for me to get in there and create those corners. So I'm using a lot of geometry here, but it really pays off with a ring like this. Join them together. Again, we're using platinum hard solder. I made a little half round little piece that suits the size that I'm looking for, because this is the first part that needs to be the size J. And the easiest way that I've come around doing this is by adding the exact same thickness wire on either end where the edges are of these settings, adding it on top of that. I should just say slightly rolled flat so that it makes nice contact. Technically, if I put that on top of the rounding that I've created, I'll have an equal spacing all the way around. If my angles were wrong, that would be slightly off. But if you've worked really carefully, you can go ahead and put the wires on the edges now, and those wires' purpose is to give me the spacing, that the gaps in between the actual ring itself and the setting I've just built. Last thing before I bring the little plate and the top part together is to round this piece of setting so that the wires round with the actual angle. I want maximum contact. I'm looking at the outside diameter of this little plate. The insides obviously are sized. The outside diameter is slightly bigger. I'll find that diameter, put a little piece of sandpaper over it, and place this setting with these wires I've just soldered on top of that, and gently move it forward and backwards, turning it around, doing the same on the other side. What I'm doing now is I'm creating an area where that setting is going to connect with a little plate I'm putting underneath it. Maximum contact there, so that when I place my solder there, that it runs over a flat area and I've got strength out of my solder joint. The piece is soldered together now. I have excess material that I need to get rid of. So I start coming in with a saw blade and I start cutting roughly around the edges. And the idea is to mirror the walls that I've just built all the way down straight. So once I've cut it out, stay a little bit on the bigger side and then bring a file in, start working towards it. Now, I've been working with these settings for most part of the day, and my eyes are like a little tired of them, so I'm going to put them aside for the moment. And I thought, let me start with the shank quickly, because the shank is a thing on its own. Roll out a piece of platinum and make it pretty thick, because I don't like little thin rings that bend over time. I like them to have a little bit of thickness to them, and this is another part of that design where we bring in a little bit of modern to the older design. And I'm going to take this shank and hammer it traditional way. I'm trying to raise up the setting towards the top because I want the section of the shank to come up and meet the setting. We want there to be a drop down from the stones down to the shank, gently down to the finger itself. The other thing that I'm going to bring in is I'm not going to give it a full rounding at the top. I'm going to try and keep it as flat as possible to reinforce those shapes that I'm seeing. I'm going to knife edge this ring by raising it up, so I'm raising the wall slightly with the hammer. Everything is rough still, but it will give me an idea exactly how high I have to raise it. So I'm making the shank now in preparation to bring the two together. Also, it gives me something else to do other than just working on the settings. We have to have a little diversity in our lives. I'm bringing the setting in, I'm marking it where I want it to be, I'm cutting it. The shank is going to be completed to the point where I can solder it, but I'm not bringing them together yet. I'm taking the setting and I'm marking with the divider how far I can remove that little support section that I've put in to leave me with the thickness of the shank, so that when the shank comes on, it basically goes into a solid piece and the rest of it still presents as a setting. Because while I have the setting completely independent from the shank, I've got more access to get to the little corners that I want to get into, refine the setting. I want to make sure that I cut the holes at the bottom. I want to make sure that everything is nice and refined, so that when I put the claws on, everything behind the claws has been worked on and refined. This stuff would be more difficult once you've also soldered the ring on, because you've got to work around the shank to make sure you don't cut anything. So there's some limitations, whereas now everything is absolutely open. The solders I'm using, I'm stepping down the whole time. We don't want any solder marks to come open, so we're using the hardest solder we possibly can to start off with, or even forging it or fusing it together. And then as we're going down, we'll go from hard, we'll go to medium. I'm joining it with medium solder at this point, and then I'm going to use medium solder on the claws as well, because I'm working away from that solder joint. I can regulate the heat over here and it's not going to affect this joint. I'm making the wires because we make everything. I know for a fact that when I make them by hand, through the roller and drawing that wire through the draw plate, that platinum is absolutely solid, and it's the best thing to hold your diamond, which is why we've done that. So we've already created the little corners. All we need to do now is to emphasize that little rounding so that we can put the claws exactly where they need to be. I'm using a parallel brace to cut these little grooves. You could be using a little round file as well. The problem with the parallel brace is going to want to run in one direction. So if you keep going around, everything's going to want to shift the whole time. So I do both sides. I want it to pull this way and I want it to pull equally that direction, so that I've got one straight line. And then when you place your wire, it's really just soldering it. Laser technology will help you to tack it. Laser technology in this case you're not going to be using to solder the entire wire. This is the security that holds the stones in. You have to take your time to make sure that these wires are perfectly soldered on. That's it guys, this ring was, as per usual, a lot of fun to make. They really are. If you follow through and you really put attention to detail with regards to its balance, it comes out to be quite a nice looking little thing. I mean, it's something that you can stare at.
It's very pretty.
Yeah. Thank you for liking the videos. It's great when we see you leaving comments. If you're new here, welcome. I hope there's something that we've done that you could learn from, which is the intention of why we're doing this. Until next week, please hit the like, subscribe, and bell icon. We've got a setting video coming up for this ring as well. I've got to get back to work. Cheers!